No one saw this coming as the Toronto Blue Jays have made more moves. They've made multiple surprising moves here, including one specific move that has huge implications going forward. We're going to break down exactly what these moves are and discuss what they mean as following the big win against the Orioles. One particular move here has a big impact going forward for the Jays. We'll break that down as well as discuss some other new updates ahead of what's going to be a big series against the Nationals. But before we get into it, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, and thank you guys again for your continued support. Ladies and gentlemen, we finished the first series for the Toronto Blue Jays. A ton more games to go, 158 more games to go, and now we're at a point where it's going to be a very interesting season. Actually, 157 more games to go after the 4-game series. But the Jays made a bunch of moves prior to today's game, and I want to dive into a couple of them because we have some new updates after today's game against the Orioles that allows a couple of these moves to be more impactful. So, again, I was at the game, I think a lot of the games this weekend, and I was unfortunately witness to Richard Lovelady's first and last appearance for the Toronto Blue Jays. I saw him opening day, and I saw him in the third game of the season. He was DFA'd today. Tommy Nance has been cleared outright waivers and have been assigned to AAA, which is actually pretty big news. We'll dive into that later. And the Jays have selected, the contract of Mason Fluharty, and he will be active for the game this afternoon, but most importantly, he's going to be active going forward. There's a couple of different things that I want to dive into here. We're going to start with the moves, and there's still one other move that I want to dive into that has big implications. But let's start with this. We're looking at Richard Lovelady, right? A guy who was a lefty, and it's going to sting a lot because he should have been not on the team. We know when they made those decisions and those moves back in spring training and towards the end of spring training, we all know Ryan Yarbrough should have made the team over Richard Lovelady. They didn't want to pay him the $2 million. They didn't think they were going to have, as many injuries as they had, specifically to Max Scherzer and all these different things. But regardless, Richard Lovelady had a disastrous Jays tenure, and it was a horrible decision by Ross Atkins in the front office to really pick him in the first place. The good sign at least here is that they had and they did damage control to help. At least they didn't wait weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. They made moves immediately, and they did so after the third game of the season. So Richard Lovelady's gone. Tommy Nance has been cleared outright waivers. He might actually be a factor going forward for the Toronto Blue Jays simply because you're at the point now where he is a long relief guy, and the Jays clearly, after using Yariel Rodriguez today in a bit of a setup role, they could, and John Schneider came out and said some things about that, they could continue to use him going forward in that role. But Mason Fluharty, I want to dive into him before we dive into somebody else here, which is very interesting. So he was, of course, selected. He is a lefty. And if you're unfamiliar with him, he's actually a prospect, one of the Jays' top prospects. A couple different things here. And he's a very interesting guy. Now, feel free to pause and read through, the advanced analytics if, it's some interesting charts here. But essentially, he has very, very good stuff. And he looked absolutely fantastic in spring. According to Keegan Matheson's charts, he's a top 15 prospect. And in the Jays organization, that is. Let's be clear about that. But it's at the point now where you have now another lefty to be able to give you some actual length out of the bullpen. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be necessarily the long guy because we're going to dive into a guy who actually is the long guy in a minute. But in spring, he had put up a 1.29 ERA in 7 innings. He struck out 40% while only walking 3. His command was fantastic. He rocks a 2-pitch arsenal of a fastball and a sweeper. This is a guy that should have been in and should have made it out of camp no matter what. He did every single thing possible to make it out of camp. I don't know why they picked Richard Lovelady. I mean, the only reason I can really think of is because of the fact that he's had some success in the major leagues in the past. He's more a veteran guy. They wanted to go with the stability of him. But they realized very quickly and Mason Fluharty is the guy to go for as your lefty, backup guy, because Brendan Little, he's going to be in theory, the specialist lefty, but he also can get out righties. You saw him today. He got out, a pinch hitting righty. I believe it was Gary Sanchez. He got out a bunch of different guys. Brendan Little looked absolutely fantastic out there. And it was at the point, I don't think it was actually Gary Sanchez. It was another right-handed hitter that pinch hit. But regardless, Brendan Little looked very, very good. And now as you start to look at some of the other, bullpen guys, I'm happy they made these moves. It's better now than never, but it's a little bit surprising that they cut loose these players this fast, and it goes to show that they are in a win now mode. I think if this was last year or previous years, they would have played it out a little bit. They would have ran with it. They maybe wouldn't have even had Alan Roden come up from the start of the season, somebody who gives you a chance to win games every single night. They are moving quick, and they are making moves that are directly impacting winning, and that was seen, and you love to see that for the Toronto Blue Jays. It's just something you absolutely love to see. And again, according to Keegan Matheson, he's the Jays, not top 15, top 20 prospect at number 19. Some players, some analysts, have him higher. He's a deceptive lefty. You can pitch multiple innings and just gets outs. When I mentioned him at the development staff and coaches in camp, multiple people would hear his name and just say big leaguer. So he gets multiple outs. He can be a long inning guy, but also he can be a guy who, just pitches from the left-handed side, throws a little bit of a different look. He has a sweeper, so it's going to be very interesting to see going forward what his impact is. But someone I want to touch on as well is Easton Lucas. Easton Lucas has also been selected to the major league team, and this is going to be big because Max Scherzer, he's going to be out for a little bit. He's put on the 15-day IL, and that's what the case is for Max Scherzer. But regardless of that, I'm not sure he's going to miss some time. He's dealing with a thumb injury, and we'll have a future video on that as well. But the biggest thing now surrounding Max Scherzer is going to be that fifth starter spot. Because, again, he pitched the third game of the season, but for all intents and purposes, let's say the fifth starting spot. Yariel Rodriguez, and this is a very interesting tweet, and it said, why is Yariel warming up? He warmed up for the eighth. He did a fantastic job. I think he's fine there. I don't agree with the why is Yariel warming up. They had really no one else to throw into the bullpen because they used Jimmy Garcia in yesterday's game, which was a bit of a interesting decision regardless. But nonetheless, this means that Easton Lucas is starting in 4 days. There is a good chance now against whatever the next lineup is. I would assume it would be the game against, so you have Bowden Francis going on Tuesday, and we'll dive into some of the probables and things like that. You have Bowden Francis going on Tuesday. Then, of course, you kind of have your rotation there. So in the next start, where Max Scherzer would have been, which he was in the 3 spot, whether that's against the Mets or whatever it is, the Nationals, Easton Lucas is going to make the next start. It would be against the Mets, you would assume, on Saturday or Friday, depending on how they mix up some of these, pitching rotations, especially with how good Kevin Gausman was. But this is interesting now because you now have Easton Lucas, who is someone who's going to have to, he's going to have to come up and start games for this team because they don't have many other players right now. They clearly don't and aren't going to put Yariel Rodriguez into the starting spot. You wouldn't assume on what I believe will be Friday. But they're also not going to, go out there and trade for a starter right now. Ben Nicholson-Smith came out and said the Jays probable. So on Monday, it's Bowden Francis. Tuesday, it's José Berríos. Wednesday is Kevin Gausman, which means that on Friday, like I mentioned, it would be Max Scherzer's spot. We're probably going to see Nathan Lucas pitch on Friday against the Mets, which is very critical because do we trust him this early in the season? That's going to be the big question against a very, very good Mets team in an afternoon game. So that's going to be the big question mark. Just a ton of moving pieces here. You have Scherzer going to the IL. You have a bunch of other moves happening. And it's at the point now where you got to hope that these things work out. I think the bullpen's fine. I think Jimmy Garcia looks great. I think, Chad Green, he'll find it. Jeff Hoffman, his first closing appearance today, looked fantastic. You have a bunch of guys who look really good. Brendan Little looks amazing. And now you add Mason Fluharty, not going to give you velocity, but he's going to be something. You see the second half here, if you're trying to believe his Lovelady was so low that one stinker is worthy of DFA, you should have just selected Fluharty to start the year. 100% agree. Don't know why they selected him. But now the shift focuses to the Washington Nationals. Again, probables are Francis, Berríos, Gausman. So the series against the Nationals in particular, it'll be an interesting one there. Of course, the Jays play tomorrow on the 31st of March, so that'll be the Bowden Francis start. Very intriguing there. They need these starters to hit. We know Berríos and Gausman are the two most, and Bassett are the 3 most stable starters in the MLB. They pitch every single game, most reliable. But Bowden Francis, he needs to have a good start tomorrow. Save the bullpen a little bit for what's going to be maybe a mix of a bullpen game on Friday. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know what your thoughts are. A ton of different moves coming. We're going to have more videos coming for you all on the Max Scherzer situation, on tons of different things. So make sure to subscribe on. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.